Welcome back to this week's issue of the Friday Club. In this week's Break Time With interview, I'm really lucky to have Nick Higgins as our guest. Nick is one of the co-founders of the Ambassador platform. Big warm welcome to you, Nick. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Sophie. Hello, everyone.
Great to have you here. One of the reasons, Nick, that I'm really excited to speak with you today is that it feels to me that every single week, the concepts of social proof and parent advocacy come up as these really effective marketing and admissions tools for our schools and our admissions teams. So super excited to have someone who's a true advocate for parent advocacy on the call with me today. Nick, I know that at the Ambassador platform, you do a lot around enabling education providers to give prospects an authentic insight into what it might be like to be involved with that institution, to enroll there. And I know that you do that by connecting current students with prospective students and parents. Do you want to tell me a bit more about the Ambassador platform before we get going?
Yeah, well, again, Sophie, thanks so much for having me, and hello to everyone watching. I think you covered it really well, but just, I suppose, to recap, the Ambassador platform enables education providers to give prospective students, really wherever they are in the world, an authentic insight into the experience of being part of that institution. And it does that by connecting prospective students, usually with current students, but also with alumni, staff members, faculty. And it connects them through user-generated content, peer-to-peer conversations, and live video streams. So we're trying to help an institution give the most authentic and the most scalable insight into what it's really like under the skin at that school, university, or college.
So I know then, Nick, that you work with over 100 higher education institutions across the world. So now that I know that you're growing really rapidly in the schools sector as well as the higher education sector, which is where I know you started, Nick, I'm really curious as to what your vision was for the Ambassador platform when you first started, and what the journey that the company has been on looks like from back then till today.
Yeah, thanks, Sophie. So I should say, I think it's important. I'm one of two co-founders.
Yeah.
So actually, the brainchild of connecting students digitally was my business partner, my co-founders, George. I really came to the business from the education sector. So I'd worked in further and higher education in the UK, and I'd just seen organically through my roles in education that connecting, what we say now, a prospective student for university with a current student, but really for me it was just one of my pupils, one of my students that I work with. That was incredibly valuable and incredibly impactful on the confidence, the quality, and I think the ambition of decisions and choices that they could make about their future. And that's something that George and I were both very passionate about. So, I think a fundamental part of the original vision was connecting real people and helping them to make better decisions to progress more effectively. And as we've grown as a company, so we work with about, I'll just say 100 plus, I'm going to be told off for forgetting the number, but over 100 predominantly higher education institutions around the world. And very much now as a technology, our mission is to help these wonderful, complex, nuanced, multifaceted institutions really show what they're about, show what their experience is really like, but to do that in a way that's fit for a digital world. Of course, there'll always be a place for in-person open days and events, but as education and student mobility becomes increasingly globalized and the expectations of prospective students demand that institutions are presenting themselves digitally, we want to make sure that the richness of experience that you communicate when someone's on the campus with you can also be done digitally too.
It's really, really insightful. Thank you. Could you give us some examples of how universities have used the Ambassador platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So I should say in really varied ways, all across the recruitment funnel, from kind of first touch point all the way to the kind of gritty end of converting offer holders. but more broadly, the platform is used predominantly as a marketing, admissions, and recruitment tool for institutions targeting international students, overseas students. But it is also used really heavily as a domestic or local recruitment tool. And I think the third really important part of our, I think the social element of our mission as a company, it's used particularly in the UK and increasingly in APAC as an outreach tool to prospective students from disadvantaged or underrepresented groups. So it's recruitment in a different guise really for that group of students. It's helping them see that there are people like them at the institution, that they realistically can progress there. And then I think, if we think about it more as a kind of strict marketing, admissions and recruitment tool, it can be used to engage people at that first touch point by providing a window into the institution, all the way down to the very end of the recruitment and admissions funnel, when prospective students for university in this case, and of course we're going to come on to talk about schools, that's very salient for this conversation, but when an international student has multiple offers, how do you convince them that your institution is the right one for them? And we found some incredible, really transformative effects actually, that a conversation between current and prospective student, ambassador and prospective student is really impactful to do that. And of course that's one of the many use cases that the platform supports.
I think from my point of view, I can completely understand how useful that is for the prospective students. Most students will have multiple offers, and they can usually decide where they want to go. So having that insight into what it feels like would be really, really important. The current students are the ambassadors on the ambassador platform. Do they get anything out of this experience?
Yeah, that's a fab question. So they definitely do. And I don't want to just speak from anecdote. Like we actually, we do a lot of research in the company with our users. And we did a huge survey. We actually released a white paper that's available on our website, all about the motivations of ambassadors. And we were particularly dealing with student ambassadors in university here. And we found that actually the overwhelming motivation that was cited by 87% of student ambassadors was that they were doing this because they wanted to help prospective students make better decisions about their future. And it's really interesting. I recommend reading the white paper. There's a number of motivations in there. Is gaining employability skills, earning additional income. But I thought it was really heartening to see that kind of peer-based support and guidance was a big motivation. And then just thinking about inside the platform. So, incentivizing ambassadors is really important. They're the thing that powers the ambassador platform, unsurprisingly by the name. And we wanted to make that really easy for institutions. So lots of tools in there that help institutions understand how much time an ambassador is working, if they do want to remunerate them that way. But also we wanted to make it great for ambassadors. So in the dedicated ambassador app, which is one of the 3 interfaces of the platform, the whole process for an ambassador is gamified. And we know all behavioral psychology tells us that human beings they like games, they like puzzles, they like to compete. So when as ambassadors do their work, they win points put them on a leaderboard. Those points also are translated by a very clever algorithm, which I won't pretend to understand. That's for the tech guys of the company. But basically that produces a live career reference for the ambassador. And just this morning, actually, we saw a student ambassador from the University of Canberra talk on LinkedIn about the employability skills she'd developed through the platform. There's a great screenshot of her on the leaderboard. And actually she was citing this as one of the things she did to gain employability skills. And she's saying, hey, I've just got a job as a solicitor back in Southeast Asia. So there's a lot in it from ambassadors, but I would say, put all that stuff I've just said about the platform aside. I think, we found certainly for student ambassadors, the fundamental motivation is wanting to help their peers, people like them, make good decisions.
That's really interesting. So one of the things that comes up a lot for us in the Friday Club, and especially for school marketers, is bringing more of the school community into that marketing and admissions process, because they do have unique stories, they have unique pulls to the institution, and as you say, can help those prospective students make a better decision. So now that you're also supporting schools through the Ambassador platform, I imagine that looks slightly different. How do you help schools, and in what ways is it different to what you've done with universities, Nick?
Um, yeah, so of course, I think I should stress this. We're not trying to kind of inelegantly force a solution that's worked well in higher education on schools. We've spent a long time working with a group of early adopter schools who've seen real success and impact from the platform. I think at an abstract level, it's all quite similar, but of course the two sectors are very different, and every school is very nuanced and very different. I think the thing that we've found predominantly is that parents are great ambassadors. I know you guys are big advocates of parent advocates, but we've of course found a strong preference from the schools that started to use us to use parents as a key group of ambassadors. And I think of course, we're very hot on safeguarding and child protection as a company, and of course in our technology as well. But I think, perhaps using younger pupils as ambassadors, of course, very practical reasons, is perhaps not as appropriate. So a preference for a slightly older ambassador, perhaps in the sixth form or in the upper years of the school. And I think a really interesting difference we found as well, actually a really positive one, is that schools are, of course, they're wonderfully diverse, but just smaller communities numerically than universities. And I think that applies not just to the student population, but to the marketing and admissions team as well. So we found actually the ability to operationalize the platform and iterate really quickly, experimenting with campaigns, has almost been a slightly quicker process, perhaps in the school space, because you're dealing with a smaller number of staff, and that's been really positive. Impact is high, but I think the ability to try new things, implement, has perhaps been even quicker. So that's been really great and very, very interesting to see, actually.
Great. So you've talked to us before, Nick, off record, about how you've been integrating the Ambassador platform as a pilot into some independent and international schools over the last few months. Are you able to tell us any more at this stage about how those pilots have gone and what those schools have seen?
Yeah, I absolutely am. So we just released a case study which we wrote in partnership with Dulwich College, Singapore, and the fantastic team led by Jason Hopner there. And I hate to bombard people with stats, but this will probably be the only occasion I give some statistics. And I recommend, check out our website, the case studies on there. But we found, so in the first 9 months since Dulwich launched the platform, and I really want to say how great they've been to work with. They helped us develop the concepts for Parent Ambassador and really, work out how we could best support schools. But they've seen nearly 400 parent-to-parent conversations, and they've seen a really strong conversion rate of 28% from users of the tap feed on their website to applicants, or really demonstrable impact on their conversion to application. And I think I'll leave the rest of the details to anyone who wants to read the case study, but I think what's great there is that, it really is having impact. But I think, before that as well, there's obviously a real appetite amongst prospective parents for these kind of engagements. And I think our work with Dulwich and, the details in the case study quantify this. And that's been great to see. I think we had a thesis that the need was there and it was going to have a positive impact, but we wanted to prove that with some hard data. And I think we've been able to do that. And we will be releasing a slew of additional case studies over the coming months. If you follow us on LinkedIn, you'll definitely see those there.
Brilliant. Look forward to that. It certainly sounds like those pilots have gone really, really well for you. So I'm really happy to hear that. Do you think, Nick, that there are any parallels between schools admissions and university admissions, even though the ambassadors might have slightly different roles?
I do definitely think there are parallels, and I'm really conscious to stress that, of course, the dynamics of higher ed recruitment and schools recruitment is very different. I think an abstract and conceptual level, it's very similar. These are globally focused education institutions trying to reach out often across large distances of, miles, culture, time zone to prospective students, and trying to really tell their story and convince them that their institution is the best fit for them.
Yeah.
So I think that's a fairly obvious parallel. I think the difference, as I see it, I think is probably the relative primacy of the decision maker in the process. And of course, this is a generalization, but I think with an older international student, I think the bias of decision is on them, with parents as a kind of supporting influence. And I think perhaps for a school, the primary decision maker is perhaps the parent, with kind of supporting influence of the student or the pupil or the child. And I know actually lots of international schools have surveyed this and actually found that the children do have a serious impact on the decision making as well. But I think that's the slight difference. And so for us, that means the types of ambassadors, the targeting, the way that the platform is packaged and delivered by the institutions to their target audience is slightly different. But in general, I think the similarities, I see them, see both sectors as part of this ever-growing milieu of international education, and therefore of the marketing, recruitment and admissions that goes with that.
So for schools that are thinking that they completely understand the idea and the concept behind parent and student advocacy, but perhaps something like the ambassador platform would be a new way of doing things for them, do you have any advice for schools like that in terms of how they can get all of their stakeholders in agreement that that's the right move for their school?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for a board or for a senior leadership team, of course, increasing recruitment or finding more best fit students is of course kind of institutional priority.
Yeah.
And so I would, for anyone who's kind of questioning whether it's a good idea, I think there's lots of studies out there that talk about the digital expectations of today's parents, for example. Of course, I've just talked about a case that demonstrates impact at a large international school. But I think probably it's a conceptual message, but I think you said it before, Sophie, that schools, they're these incredible communities with lots of different voices and perspectives in them. And the contribution of those different voices and perspectives are the things for a school or any education provider actually that I think contribute to successful marketing, recruitment and admissions, because they paint this rich picture which ultimately kind of coalesces and tells a prospective student or parent that this is the right institution for them. And today, there's no arguing that, I mean, obviously we've all just lived through COVID, but before that, the education sector was experiencing a necessary shift towards all things digital, but particularly thinking about its admissions and recruitment. And today, you don't want to lose the value of all those perspectives and voices. It's just that you need a way to communicate those digitally to really get across what the experience is like, to really showcase the magic that you see around your school every day. And hopefully TAP can be the technology to support that. And I understand that there perhaps can be a reticence when anyone says anything digital or online, particularly thinking with concerns like safeguarding and child protection in mind. And I should say, actually, like I've done a number of safeguarding roles in schools over the years, so I'm professionally very aware of its importance. But actually, we've built our technology to really think about safeguarding by design, to make it an implicit part of how the software operates. So I think one nudge I might give is that I think we're beyond the point now where digital solutions, necessarily need to suggest or come with more risk. Actually, I think if they're the right ones and they're well thought out, they can actually be an inherent part of your risk management process. And of course, for senior leaders in all kind of education institutions, that's a key concern.
Absolutely. So Nick, You've mentioned a few different case studies on your website. We'll link to that when this video goes out on the Friday Club so that people can swipe up and read them. I understand as well that you're hosting a webinar at the end of the month. Can you give us a bit more detail around that so that anybody listening can go and check it out and hear more about what you're doing in this schools admissions, schools marketing space?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're running a webinar at the end of September, and Sophie, it would be great. Obviously, you can link to that. It's all about digital ambassadors for schools, marketing, and admissions. We've got a fantastic set of speakers, including your very own Andrew E, who's going to be one of the expert panel, but also speakers from Dulwich College Singapore, Rochester Independent College, and Jeradong International School as well.
Right.
And they're going to bring, I think, great perspectives on digital ambassadors. So how they can be peers, how they can be parents, and how they can be pretty much everything in between. So I hope it's going to be some great thought leadership, but also just, really, really useful for anyone who might be thinking, oh yeah, this kind of sounds like an interesting idea. I'd say, don't trust me, come and listen to some people far more expert on the webinar, and hopefully they'll be able to convince you.
Brilliant. Well, really excited about that webinar. We'll be putting more information about that in the Friday Club newsletter and on our socials too. So I'd really recommend any schools listening do check that out. Nick, as we wrap up our break time with interview today, could you perhaps tell us what you're most looking forward to as you do more work in this area of school marketing and admissions?
I can. That's a really big question.
So it's a tough question.
I think I could probably talk 10 minutes about the things I'm excited with. I'm, as I said at the start of the interview, I come from the education sector, and so therefore I was really conscious that when we started Tatme and George Olson, my co-founder, I didn't want to be involved in something that was just going to be like a fancy technology platform that looked cool but didn't really deliver results for education providers. I've worked in a sixth form college, not a school, and I just know how time pressured everyone is, and how you have to deliver results as well as looking after a whole host of young people. It's so challenging. And so I wanted to be part of a company that delivered a technology that shows results and really helps professionals, saves them time, makes their life easier, helps them deliver the numbers. And that's certainly what we've seen in the higher education sector and what we're starting to see in the school sector now. So I'm excited to see more schools use the ambassador platform, but actually to see them getting impact and value from it too.
Brilliant. It's a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nick. You've been a brilliant guest.
Thanks.
Love chatting with you, and know that this one will be of huge interest to all of our subscribers.
Well, thank you again for having me. And final thing, anyone who's watching this, please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm sure I'll be down there somewhere in a link.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Nick. And we'll
Thanks,
talk
Sophie.
soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.